My name is Jordan Gackowski. I'm an SE with Adlumin. I'm actually an SE team lead. I got one dude who works for me, so I'm not even real management anymore. But that's because we're a startup, so it's okay. I'll get into the background of this presentation in a couple of slides. I'll give you a little bit about me. So I started my career out in the Army as a signals intelligence analyst. I worked at the National Security Agency. When I got out of the military, after doing that stuff, easy transition into IT security with MicroAge. And I don't know if there's any MicroAge people here. They are headquartered here, so you guys might actually be a little bit more familiar with them than some other markets. From there, I got a job with that company back when they were cool, doing incident response and forensics and stuff like that. Sorry if any Symantec customers in the, I didn't mean it like that. I used to run the IT security investigations program at that place. I went to work at that company who spun off this cool little product that was In-Q-Tel funded and then was acquired by that company. So then I went to that place to work for a little while to do another startup, and they got acquired by that company. And I spent 7 years doing that, and now I work for that company. So there it is in a nutshell. A little bit about me, married, no kids. I got a little tiny dog. The dog has her own Instagram, so you can scan that QR code, also guaranteed not malware. Just cute little dog pictures if you want to look at them. I used to be a much larger version of myself. I think I was about 3 bills in that picture. I lost about 96 pounds. I never hit 100. So if you don't want to talk about security, I will bore you to absolute tears talking about how many grams of protein you need to eat per pound of lean body mass in order to lose weight over a long period of time. And I also fly paramotors, which is a kind of unusual hobby. Somebody told me to put this slide in there. I'll talk to you about that too. It's super fun. Okay, now that we know each other so intimately, let's talk about security. So a little bit about Adlumin. We've been around, this actually slide needs to be updated. We've been around for about 10 years. I think officially was formed in 2016. We didn't have a usable product until 18. We just got our Series B funding. And we're kind of I think employee number 65 when I started a couple of years ago. Now we have 170 employees. It says 500 plus customers on here. We'll see we have 300 or 400 customers. We just hit over 1,300 the other day. So we're on this nice growth trajectory. And what we do is we offer a security operations platform. Our software, our technology, we built it. I like to say, is there any from marketing in here? Right. I like to say we have a SIM, but we're not a SIM, right? And because I don't want to get into a knife fight in a phone booth with Splunk about who has a better SIM. But in order to do what we do, we need to collect all your logs. But that's our technology. We built that. We want it to be easier to use, simpler to manage, things like that. We also have an MDR component, so we can manage that platform for you. If you don't want to be awake at 3 o'clock in the morning looking at alerts. I think the more practical aspect of that is we just have people who don't have people, if you're a small team and you don't want to deploy Splunk on your own, you're probably not going to also stay up at 3 o'clock in the morning watching your own alerts, right? It's just a matter of, not a matter of skill or intelligence or best effort. It's a matter of resources that you just don't have. And so that's the second half of that void that we fill. The cool part is that platform and that MDR are separate. You don't have to have us manage it, right? Whereas a lot of our competitors will say, oh yeah, we'll monitor your environment for you, but you have to buy this kind of antivirus. You have to buy this kind of firewall. That's the only way we'll look at your stuff. And so we're trying to avoid that, try to make that easier. That's the only propaganda slide. If any of that's interesting to you, there's some sales guys hanging out in the room. They would love to sell you stuff. I don't care about any of that. I'm a nerd. I want to talk about security. So the impetus for this slide, or for this presentation, so there's a blog article out there that's really kind of a cool article. It is a little propaganda-y, but it's an overview of best security practices for M365. Come on in, guys. There's plenty of room up here. And so my idea was, I talk to customers. I probably deploy Adlumin, I don't know, half dozen times to a dozen times a week with customers. And I'd say 80% of our customers are Azure customers. A good chunk of Google, a good chunk of people who are still on-prem and haven't migrated to the cloud yet, or they're in the process, or they're hybrid or whatever. But my idea was to kind of just jot some notes down. These are the things I see every day when I'm deploying these monitoring solutions for customers. and just have a real casual conversation about what I see people do and some of the best practices that they probably should be doing, and they're not. And even if I think in the synopsis I sent, even if you're a Google shop, this stuff will probably apply to you, right? I'll talk about multi-factor authentication. If you're not using MFA everywhere, you're going to have a problem, right? Like things like that. But yeah, those are the bullet items you can see. So train your employees on phishing, right? We offer that solution. You don't have to buy it from us. I really don't care. But and some people do it by themselves. Some people have a service. Some people are legally obligated to do phishing testing. I talked to a guy the other day. He's kind of like, yeah, I just do it myself. And he actually showed me what he was doing. It was pretty cool. Like he would just go through and find like news articles and like do like mini blog entries, and he'd send them out to his users. And he was just trying to keep them educated on cybersecurity concepts and threats, and they're topical and they were great. Not everybody can do that, and I'll dig into that a little bit. Use multi-factor authentication. So in our blog article, Sierra in here? All right. There she is. No. In the blog article, it says use multi-factor authentication for admin accounts. I personally think you should use multi-factor authentication for every account. I was working with a customer the other day, and we can kick out a report that says, hey, here's everybody that doesn't have MFA enabled, right? And you have service accounts and things like that in there that you expect to see. And we see like, Bob Smith. And I'm like, well, who's Bob? And he goes, oh, Bob's my CFO. And I was like, why doesn't Bob have two-factor enabled? And he goes, oh, well, Bob doesn't like two-factor, and Bob controls my budget, so Bob doesn't have to use two-factor. And I was like, I empathize with you, and I understand how you got into this situation, but you're going to have a big problem, because the CFO is like the one dude you don't want logging in at 3 o'clock in the morning, send like purchase orders to accounts payable, like, pay this $5 million PO or we're going to incur a bunch of penalties. You have to do it right now. It's a huge emergency, right? Not even not even like malware or ransomware, just old school criminal fraud. They're just going to use his account to do it. Why don't you go look at the last time he changed his password while you're at it, right? So those types of things, right? When MFA, and I'll dig into that, integrate the logs with your existing MDR solution. If somebody's watching your environment, dig into what they're watching, right? It should be more than just a couple of log sources. And I'll dig into that. And then investigate your alerts for suspicious activity, right? If you move to the cloud, you got rid of your domain controller. I think there is, my old company had this really cool video where they're like, yeah, finish the cloud migration and security is their problem. So that's done. And it's absolutely not the case, right? You need to monitor that environment and you need to be looking at those things. And then strengthen the cybersecurity with MDR providers. I'm a big fan of like try it before you buy it. See who you're going to outsource that watching and reaction mode. Like really dig into what they're doing for you and build that relationship out. And I'll dig into that as well. Cool. Let's see. So employee training. I talked about this a little bit. I like the concept of your identity is the perimeter, or your people are your last perimeter, right? I use myself as an example all the time. I work from home in Austin, Texas. There are 7 employees in Texas for my company, and we don't go to an office. One guy lives 20 minutes away, one guy lives 45 minutes away, the other guys live like 3.5 hours away. We're not all going to go hang out in a building together. But I need to get, right? I need to get online, I need to do my job, and I can do that without VPNing in or going to a building. If I get compromised, like whatever's on my laptop is what stopped me from getting compromised. That's all you got, right? And the human element, like I love looking at people's logs and you're like, Jordan tried to like install malware 10 times last week. We blocked it every time, but he keeps trying, right? And so you're like, hey dude, what are you doing? Like, why do you keep trying to do this? It tells you it's malicious and it blocks you, but you keep trying. So you will have users in your environment. They will try to circumvent a control. Maybe they think they're doing the right thing. Maybe they're just idiots. I don't know. Like I like to assume the best, but it's not always the case with everybody. so treating those human beings like what do they have access to if they get compromised, right? Is a big deal. So training them is important. AI is making it harder. Like I don't think I have a phishing email lately. I had this awesome screenshot. I think I still have. I should put it in this presentation, but it was like a email came with a I think it was an SCR file as the malicious attachment, and it said insert your payload here .scr, right? Like the malware is so kitted up, you don't need to be a hacker. You just need to download a tool set and then just start blasting people with email and see which idiot clicks on something, right? So the bad guys, and this was a couple years ago, I used to get the dears, please kindly click the link to install the critical software, love your IT department. You're like, okay, I'm not going to click on that. Like I'm not an idiot. I can put that same email into ChatGTP and go, hey man, make this make more sense, and it'll come out nice and clean. The bad guy will just copy and paste it and put their payload in there, right? The AI, like large language models and stuff, are making it easier for the bad guys to mess with your users and get around this. So you have to continuously train them to look for, hey, this is a new indicator, not just misspellings and weird grammar and things like that. And I think it'll just get more interesting. Like I think you could probably tell ChatGPT, like, hey, run my phishing campaign for me. It'll send out 1,000 emails for you, right? I guarantee that's, I don't know, like 3 weeks on the horizon probably. And then the big one is tailor the training to your industry, right? If you work in a bank, don't send somebody a QR code for a free pizza. Or maybe do that as like your first phishing test and see how many people do it. But like if you work in the energy sector, or you work in defense, or you work in government, or you work in finance, you work in healthcare, like tailor those trainings and phishing tests to your user base, right? If I would get in a ton of trouble for a HIPAA violation, send somebody a fake, X-ray or something, and see if they click on a PDF of an X-ray that has like a beacon in it. You're like, all right, dummy. Why would you open a patient file that was attached to email, right? That's not a secure mechanism to exchange that kind of information. And that's what you're trying to teach them. And the last one, like increase the difficulty level, right? Put your training on hard mode eventually. Maybe you have to start it easy, that's okay. But if I send you the same phishing mail every month and you report it because you see the same thing every month, you're not getting smarter as a user, right? You are not keeping pace with the adversaries and the techniques and stuff that are out there in the world. And look, I get it. I was talking to a guy who was like a construction company, right? And he's got these guys driving around in trucks with like the big ruggedized laptops doing like costing and things like that. And he's like, I'm not saying they're dumb. They're really smart guys at what they do. They're not technical, right? So he's like, he has to start with that user population at a different training level than the IT department. And I think that's appropriate too. Like if you can customize that for your different population groups, think of that when you're doing these things. Any questions? Oh, by the way, yeah, you can interrupt me. I don't care about any of that stuff. If you have a question, just shoot your hand up. We can all participate and learn. Multi-factor authentication. You heard my feelings on this earlier. Yeah, it's completely not negotiable, I think, at this point in time, right? You can tweak the details of it, like what do you use for two-factor, how often, like if you set a persistent cookie on my laptop, like do I have to put my new two-factor in like once a month or once a week, or, you can get in the minutia of how it's implemented, but I don't think it's not optional anymore. Remember on the slide I worked for NetWitness, was acquired by RSA. I worked at RSA during the RSA breach, right? If you can remember the olden days. One of the takeaways, they called it the Magnificent Seven. The bad guys who penetrated RSA found 7 accounts in Active Directory that did not have two-factor enabled. They simultaneously weren't required to use two-factors. Some of them were service accounts. They didn't have to have two-factor enabled, and they were in like the RAS group. That's how long ago it was. So they could VPN in, and you didn't have to use two-factor. And so they just guessed one of them. And that's how their initial entry point into the network happened. That was over a decade ago, right? And it was a big deal. The NSA still won't admit, well, is it the Chinese government? We're like, yeah, we don't know. But it was definitely not some AAA ball hacker. Like that was, Division I hackers coming after them. But that's how they got in. Very simple mechanism, like no super secret package of undetectable malware or anything like that. Now this story is, like I said, amazing in a bad way. This is from 2 weeks ago. CISA admits that a U.S. government agency, who they won't say who it was hacked by a former employee's credentials that did not require two-factor authentication. The guy doesn't even work there anymore, and an adversary is able to log in as that person, and they are not challenged for two-factor authentication. And this is in 2024, right? You would think the level of oversight in a government agency would be to the point where, like, dude, you have to use two-factor, right? And so if you get a chance, just Google it, CISA, two-factor, government hack, or you'll find like 100 articles on it. But I was just reading through like every paragraph. I was like, no way, no way. So they get into SharePoint, they use that account to compromise somebody else's credentials. Those credentials, they had elevated privileges. From that elevated privileges, they could go over and create more accounts and do things like that. Right? But yeah, it's like you're reading through it and you're just like, wow. So yeah. Audit and enforce two-factor, right? These are some of the cool things. I really like Duo. I think most people are using like Office, like you have a E5 license, you're going to use Microsoft Authenticator, right? Just makes sense. But the new Authenticator is a lot better. Like it pushes and you go, oh, 24, and you send it back. When that transaction happens, Duo was like one of the first ones your phone would buzz and you go, yeah, I approve that. That was me, right? Now, if I like authentication spam you at 8:30 in the morning, right? I know you live in Arizona, so I wait until 8:30 in the morning and I just send you like 100 Duo logins and you jam one of them and it works. Now I'm in. I've defeated your two-factor in a very, kind of dumb manner, and it worked. Now I set a persistent cookie for 30 days. Okay, how do you detect that, right? It logs the geographic location of that device when that transaction happens. So if my phone is here in Phoenix and my laptop that's accessing O365 or M365, let me get my branding straight, is in Kenya, that's not me, and my account is compromised, right? So you need to be able to looking for those aspects. Like if you're doing MFA, it's a great control. Monitor it, figure out how it's being used, audit it. Did the CFO convince somebody to turn off two-factor for me? You don't know, right? You need to go pull that information, audit that data, and make sure you're doing that kind of stuff. And I hate this one at the bottom. When you sign up for an Adlumin account, we email you your first token, and then you can change your token method. I hate, like my bank still texts me when I log in. I'm like, can't I just like scan the little QR code? Like isn't that better? One of the another breach I was looking at, you go to the T-Mobile store and convince some guy that that's your phone number, and they set the phone to you, or you actually have an active mechanism to automate that via API. Like if I get a set of compromised credentials for some goofball fly-by-night telco, and I can do number portability, right? I just take your phone number and put it on my phone, and then I force you to use SMS as your authentication method, and now I'm two-factoring in as you, and you don't know, because you don't know that text message didn't go to you, right? And this also goes back to like the phishing awareness, right? Hey, Mr. Gackowski, I have this really important document I need to send you, but I'm going to send you a 6-character code. Can you read that code to me so I can make sure that I'm actually talking to you? Like, great little social engineering aspect of like, sounds legitimate. I always tease like, I'll call Drew standing in the back, my sales guy. I'll call Drew up and I'll tell him I have his purchase order for $1 million. He doesn't have $1 million, his whole pipeline this quarter, right? But he'll read that code to me, right? To open that super secret PDF file that I sent him with the purchase order. Maybe not, he's smarter than that. But yeah, I'm not a fan of using it. If I already compromised your account and you're using email as your two-factor mechanism, or I can compromise your email, I can get access to your mail on like a read-only basis, and then I can get authenticated as you into other systems. I'm a big fan. Use an actual token application if you can in most circumstances. And yeah, MFA method change. I'm a big fan of like user logged on, MFA failure, user logged on, MFA failure, user logged on, MFA token method changed, user logged on successfully from Mongolia. You're like, that's a compromised account, right? Like immediately, that should be something that you flag every time. So those are just things to think about. Again, I don't care what you're using for MFA, please use MFA and monitor MFA. Is anybody not using MFA? Please raise your hand. No. Yeah. Just go back to your office and have a talk with somebody who writes the checks. Then integrate, so this is where we get into like integrating your Azure / M365 logs with your MDR solution. And I want to pick on MDR providers necessarily, but I talk to a lot of people like, oh yeah, we have MDR provider. Oh, what do? They monitor my antivirus. And you're like, all right, what else? Or you have like an old-timey SIM, right? I have a machine in my data center and it has all the logs in it, right? You're like, cool, but you migrated to O365 3 years ago. Where are those logs at? And you're like, oh, well, we were going to try to get them and connect them up in there, and it's really complicated, so we just never did it, right? Like that's important. If you're not managing those, if you're not treating cloud properties, O365, Google, AWS, Oracle, whatever you want to call it, right? Just like your perimeter of your data center, like you migrated to the cloud and then you didn't bring all your controls with you is a common kind of thing. 2 years later, you're like, oh crap, I got to figure out how to monitor all my stuff I put in the cloud. So correlate those to multiple log sources. The biggest one, whatever system you're using to monitor or whatever service you're using to monitor, if it's an MDR, make sure they're not just like, oh, I got firewall and antivirus. Like I'm good, right? You're like, no, like none of that stuff lives here anymore. It's all up in the cloud. My firewall isn't even a firewall anymore. It's just a big, dumb, slow router, right? My firewall is there to stop me from accessing the internet fast. Nothing comes in on it. Like, I don't know, if you go and do an audit of your firewall rules, do you have any inbound firewall rules at all anymore, right? Because you're not hosting anything anymore. Like that stuff's all in the cloud. I remember talking to people, hey, do you guys use the cloud? No, we don't use the cloud. Oh, okay. I notice your website is hosted on GoDaddy. Is that your GoDaddy or is that hosted somewhere else? Like, oh yeah, we moved that up there years ago. Oh, okay. You have an Exchange server in your basement still? What? No, we use O365. Okay, cool. You use Siebel as your CRM. You have like a Oracle box in your office? Like, no, we use Salesforce. You're like, okay, so you use the cloud. Stop messing around, right? So it's those kinds of things where your firewall used to have a data center and you hosted your own website, right? I would never, like, how many outages do you have to endure before you're like, man, that's somebody else's problem. That's Cloudflare's problem now. I'm not doing that anymore. Same thing with email, right? You remember, when's the last time you had to chase somebody around and be like, your mailbox is too big, right? You got to trim that thing down or I can't run the Exchange backups every night. Maybe I'm dating myself, maybe I'm a little bit older. But you know, remember like having those arguments with like the pack rat in your organization has a 6 gig mailbox. And you're like, dude, what are you CCing yourself every time you send a 100 megabyte attachment? Like, what's wrong with you? Sorry if anybody does that, I apologize. But yeah, everybody's moved that stuff off site now because it's just easier and those are the types of things that you're looking at. And then the big one is if you correlate all those different logs together and you're putting them all in one place, are you able to use those logs? When you get a detection, can you use that to disrupt the bad guy? Somebody logs in from Mongolia, like that's not them. Can you turn off their account? Or do you have to wait until you come in on Monday morning and look at the alert? Or if your MDR provider sends you an alert and goes, hey, this guy just logged in from Mongolia. And you're like, awesome, I wish you had done something about that on Saturday at 3 o'clock in the morning because I'm looking at it on Monday at 8 a.m. and I have to clean up a big mess. So it's do you have a mechanism to do SOAR functionality? And it doesn't have to be complicated, right? Do you have a SIM? Yeah, go buy Splunk. Well, I only have one employee. Okay, well, don't go buy Splunk, right? Probably a bad idea. But do you have SOAR capability? Yeah, I bought Splunk and I got the Phantom add-on. You're like, all right, dude, have fun with that, right? There's only one of you, right? But just the easy, basic things. Can I disable an account? Can I knock a machine offline? Right? Hey, you have ransomware. Okay, cool. Your internet doesn't work anymore, right? Like those types of things. And then you can clean it up later. But if you can take action earlier and you can automate it, go for it. Joel's in here somewhere. We were chatting earlier. He goes, yeah, I got a false positive, but I don't care. I think he said, he locked that dude out, I'll unlock his account. That's better than him being compromised, right? Sorry, Oops. The idea being if, you can kind of turn the dial how heavy-handed you want to be, but but being able to take action is an important part of just, I was joking, like if you just have a box of logs, that's all you have is a box of logs, right? The purpose of having a box of logs is to do something with that data. Take that data, turn it into intelligence, and then take action on that intelligence. Same concept, right? Investigate, if you're just getting alerts and you're getting alert fatigue, maybe look at what you have deployed and look at how it's deployed. But if I send you an alert and you don't do anything about it, as I always tell people, like, I'm just gonna not send you alerts, right? Like, you're not gonna do anything with them, so why should I even bother you? Right, that's the whole, like if you're paying, especially if you're paying somebody for MDR and they send you an alert and you're like, another alert, I'll get to it tomorrow, right? You're like, dude, I'm just gonna not send you the alerts, right? It doesn't help. I use the another old like blast from the past, the Target breach. Does everybody remember when Target got owned? They had a full in-house SOC. They were using ArcSight. This was like before Splunk was the 800-pound gorilla. ArcSight was the 800-pound gorilla. They had a 30-person in-house SOC staffed 24/7. One of the findings was they had 2 million alerts that nobody had ever looked at. Right, so if you have 30 people, 2 million alerts, 5 minutes to triage and clear each alert, those dudes are gonna retire before they get done with all of their alerts, right? So, you know, you have to look at the alerts, you have to work through them, don't get underwater, because like if you have something that fires 10,000 times, you're like, that's probably not true. I had one for a customer, he had set up a Windows scheduler event. It's funny, this is a nerd who doesn't trust people. He had a PowerShell script in NT-Scheduler, that's how old I am, Windows Scheduler. I remember ntsched.exe, but and so the PowerShell script would fire the Acrobat updater. So he was like really worried about like PDF compromise. Like I send you a malformed PDF that exploits something in Acrobat Reader, and I get you to open it, then I can exploit your machine. So he's like, every day that PowerShell script runs like 3 times and forces Acrobat to update ahead of its normal schedule that's like every couple of days or every week or whatever. Our SOC was like, hey, you have a PowerShell script in Scheduler that runs a JavaScript file. Like, what are you doing? And they immediately clued in on it, and that was cool. But we don't want to alert, you know, he had this scheduled event on like 1,000 machines or something like that. So we're like, it was kind of cool. I like read all the investigative notes, like, yeah, this is legitimate. We know exactly what all these files are. We're going to tune the detection to remove this, because you don't want you don't want to wake up in the morning and be like, oh wow, 10,000 alerts, awesome, thanks. Super fun. And then I think I was talking about this before, like correlating the events against your MFA, right? So if it's in, you know, if your MFA is built into O365, super easy, we get all those logs. If it's something else, make sure that both sets of data are in there and you're able to look at them side by side. The user is the user and they're using 3 different services, and I can see all of those events coming in from those different platforms. Let's see, what else? I'm just blowing through these slides. I woke up at 2 o'clock this morning and flew out here from Austin, and I had like a lot of caffeine, so I think I'm talking kind of fast. And I'll probably have more later. If they're giving out like beer at happy hour here, like I'm gonna fall asleep. So everybody keep an eye on me. Do me that favor, okay? And then the last part, like, show of hand without naming names. Do you have how many people in here have an MDR provider or an MSP that's watching stuff for you? Okay. This is like one of the biggest, so I worked on a project for a really big company, and we were like their outsourced incident response, and we were also their outsourced SOC with another organization. And it was a horrible relationship. Like these 2 organizations just like would nickel and dime each other. Like, oh, you didn't write this detection correctly. Oh, well, that's a change to the scope of work, so we're going to charge you for that. And like, it was horrible. It was like just the most, like, it was like 2 people that hated each other just kept dating for no reason, right? Like, so another company I worked with was awesome, right? Everybody's trying to help each other out. I think there was some, on the business side, it was like a fixed bid thing, so there was no like way that you could increase workload and try to mess with each other. So that part was nice and clean. But but at the end of the day, it is a relationship, right? And I have customers now. You can log into Adlumin, play with whatever you want, look at whatever you want, and I have customers who are like, "That's awesome, I love that." I've got the customers like, "Man, I don't want to know how any of that stuff works. You just call me if there's a problem." And both of those are suitable. Like the security professional in me cries a little bit on the "I don't care what's happening" guy, but that's okay. He's busy. But build that relationship, kind of refine that. When we onboard people, we're always like, "Okay, what do you guys do? Like, who lives where? What's important to you? Is there anything we should be monitoring?" Right? And because like on day one, week one, I I did a deployment with this customer. They're in the Midwest. They're an electronics manufacturer, and immediately, like when we set the behavioral kind of algorithms, like you are a U.S. based entity, and that's all we know about you. And immediately they're like, "Hey, some guy just logged in from China," and they're like, "Well, we got a factory in China." We're like, "Oh, okay, good to know. Write that down." You know. But like, refining that relationship. So whoever you're outsourcing to, kind of make sure that you're engaged with them. Do they offer do you have like a monthly, "Hey, what have we been doing lately? Like, how many tickets have you guys closed for us? Like, is everything working correctly? Oh, do you guys have any new stuff that you just came out with? Now you can offer O365? I would love for you to monitor those logs. That'd be great. Let's add that in there." Like, just have that back and forth and take advantage of anything they offer, in a good way. Not don't take advantage, but and then we talked about this a little bit more. What is your MDR monitor, right? Are you getting everything you want in there? I hate when I'm talking to a customer and yeah, they're like, "Oh, we have MDR through insert EDR tool." I'm like, "So they monitor your antivirus?" "Oh yeah. They also monitor our firewalls." "Okay, cool. What firewalls?" "Their firewalls." Like same company makes both. And you're like, "Yeah, I don't know, man." Like, so, and I'm also a big fan. I say the opposite of that is like, you don't need to send every router log to your SIM to have good security, right? Like, really take a look at like, what am I sending and why, and what alerts does it generate? I don't know how many people I've talked to back in the olden days of like, I've talked to people where they're like, "We need to buy a SIM." I'm like, "Well, what do you guys have now?" "Oh, we have ArcSight." "Okay, so what's going on with that?" And they go, "Oh, we're going to fund this ourselves, and we're not going to tell the networking people about it." And I'm like, "Why are you doing that?" And they go, "Because they'll just put all their network stuff in there, and then the SIM won't work anymore." And so they're like, they literally went and made a case they could get budget to buy a second SIM from another vendor and not put the networking stuff in there, just put security stuff in there, right? So there's a practical aspect of like, look, if somebody unplugs a router, I want to know about it so I can go plug it back in. All right, cool. Operational stuff, it makes sense. Or if, the networking team is funding your SIM, then fine, they get to put their logs in there and they can look at router logs all day long. But if I made like a triage kind of pyramid of like what you need to put in there, like the router logs are way later. Like nobody's ever been like, "Oh, I got hacked. Oh shit, bro. Sorry, this is being recorded. Show me your router logs. We can get to the bottom of this right away." Like it becomes important later on, but it's not a day one triage IR type of a thing. So when you're like, what do you put into it, and what is your MDR monitor for you? Like, kind of look at those kind of things. Because you're just spraying them with trash, they got to figure all that stuff out, right? And it's not helping them make good, decisive decisions about it. Like identity and access management, multiple sources if applicable, firewall logs, antivirus logs, on-prem AD, like log on, log off. I see that a lot. There's one, the GPO is set to log failed logons, but not successful logons. And we're like, "Why do you have that set up?" And the guy's like, "I don't know." And we're like, "Well, when was that GPO created?" It was like 1998, right? So I have a theory. I cannot test it. I have no proof. I suspect they built like an NT4 domain controller sometime in the late 90s. And it had like a 500 meg hard drive. So they turned off logging for successful logons because they didn't want it to fill up with logs. That GPO in their default GPO setting stayed there for 20 years, right? Because nobody went back and changed it. If I can't see successful logons, I can't see that like the CFO's administrative assistant just logged on to like your QA portal and downloaded a bunch of source code, because I don't know that they did it, right? Like successful logons are just as important as failed logons from that standpoint. But yeah, so anything identity related, anything security tools, if you have anything monitoring east-west traffic, any IDS, IPS, things like that are great. Honeypot, there's a bunch of free honeypots out there. We offer a free one with our tool. It doesn't need to be full deception technology. But if I put a box on my network and it has SSH open and you SSH into it, I want to know who you are, because you're not supposed to do that. Or an SMB share, right? Oh, hey, look, a file share that I have access to. Let me see what's on it. You're like, who are you and where do you work and what do you think you're doing just cruising around the network clicking on things? Or your automated malware. You're some crappy commodity malware, some dirty vendor like me and Drew came into your office and plugged into a cable sitting on a conference room, and the first thing my computer did is like, hey, let me see what's on the network, with some piece of malware that's been there for 20 years, right? Makes it super simple to detect those things. It's an easy log source to build and put in there. It doesn't need to be super complicated. It doesn't need to cost a lot. You can do it for free. And test it out, that middle bullet. What I found a lot of times is, and this is me picking on MDR. So Splunk, they're big, they're complicated, they're expensive, nobody likes them. All right, we'll make fun of them all day long. On the other end of it, I don't know how many customers I'm talking to, like, oh yeah, we have an MDR provider. Oh, cool. Well, how's that going? Like, oh, it's not going that well. Well, how didn't you test it out before you bought it? Like, oh no, they wouldn't let us. They showed us a bunch of slides about how awesome the SOC is and the workflow that they do and everything. Try it out. Get your data, put it in the platform, let them monitor it, see if it works or not. Like that's a huge one. I don't understand why people make those investments without trying it first. It's just like any other security product or service that you're going to buy. If you're going to buy a new firewall, dude, ship me one. I'll try it out. Right? You don't just make an investment like that. The ability to see if it actually does what they say it's going to do, I think is really important, and not enough people do that. Obviously, we do that. We encourage people to do it. I love picking fights with my competitors going, yeah, we'll do a full production deployment. It'll take about 2 hours. We'll have a meeting a week later to look at all the data we collect and see if we found anything interesting. And go back to competitor X and tell them you want to do a full production rollout before you'll make a decision about this investment, and tell me if they pump the brakes or not. Right? It's Paul Whittier, one of our coworkers, has this great saying. He goes, if I make really delicious cookies, I'll have you try one. Right? If my cookies kind of suck, but they're pretty, I'll just hold them over here and let you look at them. Right? But I won't let you taste them. I want to make you buy a dozen of them, and then you can find out if they suck or not. Right? That kind of mindset. I don't have anything else. That's 39 minutes and 56 seconds of a 60-minute presentation. Questions? Open up to anybody. We got some time. I don't know if lunch. Matt, is lunch out yet? 5 minutes for. Okay, let's do 5 minutes, and then we can get you guys out of here early. Anything? Paramotor. My dog. Whatever. Sir.
What's your feelings on just-in-time access versus today?
Either, yeah, it's a disruptive technology. I think it works great. It's a little bit harder to implement, I think, but I think it's going to get more and more popular, and passwordless. I hate talking to customers. What are you guys working on this year? Oh, we're doing zero trust. Awesome. What's that? Right? Yeah. What's that mean to you, right? So that's always a fun one. But yeah, I'm a big fan. Hey, prove who you are every time, and the mechanism that you use, as long as it's not just a password, is great. Something you have, something you are, whatever. I miss my little tappy token that would hey, is that you? Yep, beep, 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 beep. Nobody else is touching that token except me. It's me. Yeah, I have my old YubiKey in my bag somewhere. It's awesome. So any disruptive technology, when I say multi-factor authentication, another mechanism to prove that it's you, that can't just be harvested off the dark web and replayed across the internet for free, right? The other thing I get with that is it's not always I have a Duo authenticator, a Microsoft authenticator. I got a Battle.net authenticator for World of Warcraft on here. They all function the same, right? So it's easier to say, hey, we're going to use Microsoft Authenticator for Office, and we're also going to use it for Adlumin, right? You can't get into our portal as an administrator without two-factoring in. But yeah, any of those technologies are great. I think, especially if they're easy to use from the user standpoint, right? Yeah, the little thing flashes green. Cool, I just two-factored in, right? I proved it was me. It's a hardware token. It's the only one that exists in the world, right? Yeah. I don't like text because it's SMS, and I can, yeah, so I can intercept. One, you can intercept, like SMS is kind of old technology, especially if you're up against a real adversary, like a grown-up adversary. They'll have your phone number. They'll know who you are, and then the ability to like do a SIM swap. If I can scam some dude at the phone store into giving me a different SIM card, now I'm you, and you have no idea that happened. It's a good fallback, like, and I understand why people use it, and there's practical reasons, right? I don't know the number of times I've talked to people, we want to do two-factor, but I can't force my employees to put the app on their personal phone, right? All right, cool. Give them a freaking token. They can hang around their neck. Cost you $45 per employee. I don't, that kind of thing. So to your point, there are, I think, some practical considerations for using something other than just a token code. But yeah, I hate SMS from the standpoint. It's kind of a weak mechanism. You can be socially engineered into giving it away. I can technically intercept it, or I can disrupt, or I can take it away from you. You know what's a cool availability attack? A CEO can't log in anymore because I nuked his token, and the only mechanism you had set up was SMS. Like, now you're going to have a long day explaining that one.
Right. So what was the alternative to Authenticator?
Yeah, and basically an Authenticator app is generally the easiest.
What's another one other than the one Microsoft?
I use like Duo as a product that Cisco uses. They were kind of like one of the newer ones, like Google Authenticator. So there's two pieces to it. One, like if I'm using Microsoft Authenticator with Microsoft, like it's much more proactive. It buzzes. Like I logged in out here this morning. So I left Austin at 6 a.m. Austin time, 4 a.m. Phoenix time. I land here. I go to the hotel. Luckily, they had a room. And I run over here on one of those little green scooters, and I open my laptop. I log in on the guest Wi-Fi, and the first thing is like, dude, what are you doing in Phoenix? You have to do two-factor, right? Your IP address changed. But it buzzes, and it's like, hey, type the number that you see in on the screen. So I didn't have to go 66423. Oh, crap. It just buzzes, and it's like, is it a 16? Or Google gives you three choices, and it's like 16, 24, or 52, and you're like, that one. You just touch it. So it's stronger than like just, let me wait for the clock to reset. Okay, let me touch you 60, right? So it's proactive. So there's a good argument to be made for you want that push notification, and I get that geographic data that I was talking about earlier. I know where your phone, as soon as you hit that button, I know where your phone is. And that's way better than a text message or just reading the 6 numbers off of there. And yeah, like, I don't know how many people I talk to, like, yeah, we used to have Duo, now we use Microsoft. Why? Well, yeah, E5 license comes with free. And you're like, oh, what do you use for manage MDM? Oh, I use Intune. Why? Well, it comes with our E5 license. It's free. Like there's a lot of stuff. Is it the best? I don't know, but it works and it's cheap. So there's a practical aspect of that. Why does PowerPoint want to use my camera? Looking around this room. Other question. Somebody back there had their hand up before we started that little adventure. Anybody have a sim that they're maybe not getting the most out of? Want to admit that or talk about it? We're all friends here. It's totally cool. So any input on that, or just it's hard to manage? Okay. Yeah, I mean it's a, like, I always joke around like you have a PhD in data science? Like, do you want one? Like, no, not really. I'm 52 years old. I'm not going back to school now. Yeah, it's hard to manage, I think, is a big one, right? The classic, what do you got? I got a box of logs. It's awesome. I look at it sometimes, right?